Last week, JFAC announced that they are shaking up how the committee will craft their budgets in the 2024 legislative session. Historically, the state's budget writing process was all but owned by the executive branch and Idaho's permanent establishment. This led to swelling budgets and an unchecked bureaucracy, while lawmakers scrambled to keep their heads above water during an already busy legislative session. We will dive into this revamped funding approach and how it could put the committee on a path to more conservative budget writing on this week's episode of Fiscal Fridays. The traditional budget-making process put the legislature back on its heels for accountability and reining in spending. Legally, state agencies are required to submit their budget requests to the governor for review in September of each year. Then, the legislature would consider the governor's recommendation as introduced during his State of the State address on the first day of the legislative session. This meant that the governor had 3 months to prepare a budget that the legislature would have 6 weeks to study before votes are cast. During those 6 weeks, agency directors would make their case for why the legislature should approve the requested budgets. Ultimately, this is a free opportunity for agencies to lobby for more spending. Ultimately, the legislature would develop their budgets using the governor's recommendation as a template. Adjustments generally featured cuts and additions to his original request, but giving the governor the first crack at the budget naturally limited the legislature to the range of possible options for spending control. After all was said and done, most of the budgets would come to the floor in the final 2 weeks of the session. The legislature's only constitutionally required duty is to set a budget before they go home for the year. This means that they are more inclined to vote yes on every spending bill to prevent delaying the end of the session. This encourages gamesmanship and prevents bad budgets from failing. By comparison, the revised budget process would allow for the legislature to provide more accountability and have more control. Now the legislature will be able to receive budget insights earlier than the governor's introduction during the State of the State address. Budgets will also be set earlier in the session, with about half as much testimony from state agencies who try to lobby for their own funding. The legislature will also consider maintenance budgets alongside the governor's request. The logic here is that JFAC could see what it would look like if the agency simply continued operation per the status quo. There will also be a number of measures to improve accountability and control over spending growth. One measure includes adding more accountability language to every budget bill. It also makes use of expanded legislative audits to identify misspending and require agencies to take corrective action before they get new appropriations. A final measure is to impose a spending limit on overall appropriations. Historically, the governor imposed a 3% spending limit on growth in general fund appropriations, but this ignored spending in dedicated and federal funding streams. This will provide a starting point for all agency spending, putting the legislature on a real budget. So, what does all this mean for you? Are all these changes really going to save you any money, or are we just reorganizing the deck chairs on the Titanic? Well, the answer is it is really up to the members of JFAC. Accountability is only as good as those enforcing it, but many on JFAC have a pedigree of big spending, with the committee's average score on the spending index at a dismal 24%. But there are reasons to be optimistic. Co-chairs Wendy Horman and Scott Groh are motivated to squash the disrespect for legislative appropriations seen coming out of agencies like the Department of Health and Welfare. Under this new system, lawmakers may be more inclined to say no to new spending items. They are also less likely to simply vote yes just because they don't want to be the one to delay going home on time. A dilemma that Speaker Mike Moyle even used to flip a vote on a budget last year. New spending caps also mean all funds count, preventing the governor from being able to put an artificial limit on locally sourced spending and backfilling with DC dollars. In some, agencies have gotten away with too much. The legislature appears to be making a genuine effort to curb a bureaucracy gone rogue. We will see how effective these measures are in 2024, but at the very least, they seem to be a great start. Ultimately, these changes could offer more money returned to taxpayers and stunt the growth of our inflated state government. So what do you think? Are all these changes cause for celebration? Or will the same old big spending habits prevail yet again in 2024? Tell us in the comments below or send us an email to media@idahofreedom.org. For more episodes of Fiscal Fridays or other great content from the Idaho Freedom Foundation, please visit idahofreedom.org. Thank you.